Okay, so the next part of this is to make little bundles, and I'm putting them in an old coffee tin in little small bundles that are manageable because we're going to soak these next to start loosening the outer bark, and then we've got to scrape the outer bark out of the fibers. So if we do the whole bundle at once, it's really unwieldy and it makes a huge mess. So what we're doing here is I'm going to get about, maybe about that much per bundle. It's not a huge amount. You want the actual bundles to be small. Pull that off. And since we're going to soak this in bundles, it'll be soaking wet and kind of cold by the time we need to untangle all of this. So what I do is I twist this just a little bit. Like that. Twist it and then wrap it around my hand. Kind of twisting a little bit as I go so that when it's wet, I can untwist it and know where I'm at. And then I take the loose ends and then just wrap them, no knots, just wrap them a few times and stick them in my cup. Again, small amount. Get that out. A few twists here to keep it from tangling. Doesn't have to be twisted tight. Wrap, twist and wrap, and then somewhere when you've got a few inches left, a few times around, and that's portioning them out for easy management in one of the next steps here. Now you can see that there is a lot of decent fibers that are pretty clean all the way down. I could pull these out, and these, anything in this quality, you know, they're pretty much straight pure fiber there. Could skip the next step. I'll go ahead and pull those ones out. Where am I going to put these? Put them under here. And they don't have to be perfect, obviously. Close is good enough for this particular step. All right, there we go. There's the fibers. Now we've got this. Now the important part here is we do need to submerge this in water completely. So if you end up with a ton of bundles, good for you. But you might want to either get a bigger container or do 2 batches. The other concern to keep in mind, when you soak these, you don't want to soak them for more than about 24 hours, maybe up to 36. Because what you don't want is for them to start rotting in the water, and you want them to be fully submerged, just to keep the fibers in good condition. Otherwise, if you soak them for too long, they can rot. They can also start to ferment. A certain amount of fermentation loosens the outer bark and makes it easier to take off, but if you do even just a little bit too much, it starts to break down the fibers, and then you've just wasted the whole batch. Okay, so today we are going to be scraping fiber away from the bark. And here we have our little bundles of bark that we stripped from the stalks and bundled up, and they've been soaking for about 24 hours. As you can see, that water is turned kind of tea brown. Wouldn't really recommend eating it though. I'm going to take one bundle at a time and wring it out. Dry it a little bit here. Then carefully find my ends and untangle it, unwrap it. See where this is where I twisted it when I was making the bundles, and because I twisted it, it's easy to see where the where the bundle is so you don't end up tangling your ends quite so badly. So I'm going to kind of untangle these a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't want to break them up too much. The big, thick, wide ribbons like this are a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to take one, nice wide one, gently tease it out of the package here, and set this aside. What I'm using here is just a disposable plastic knife with a serrated edge and the backside of a nylon cutting board that doesn't have cut marks on it. It's nice and smooth. And when you look at one of these ribbons, you'll see one side that has some fibers sticking out. The other side is the one that you want up. This is the outside side of the bark. Put this down on my cutting board and gently, using my serrated knife, start stripping that. Now this is exactly what I want it to happen. I want the thin outer bark to start coming off like that. And all of these are the perfect clean white fibers. So now I can just kind of gently pull the bark off of the fibers. Start a pile for that. You're going to get a lot of it. And I personally prefer, once I have one end nice and clean, I come in with my nail and just gently tease up that thin bark layer. Hold on off. As you can see, the fibers that I'm pulling are becoming less and less as I go. So I'm actually just going to pull the first batch off as long as I can. And I'm not done with that piece yet. I'm just going to take these nice fibers that I've pulled off and I'm going to put them down over here on the side. And make sure you don't lose them if you have a white tablecloth. You'll need to come back to those. Now, the end over here is where I was pulling those fibers off of, and some of them tangled a little bit here. So I've got fibers that I can pick up and kind of pull a new strand. Oh, it was just a little piece. Let me put that over here in my stack of cleaned fibers. And then using my nail, get the thin outer bark off, peel that, grab my fibers, peel back. Keep them as long as I can, and add this onto the stack, which is promptly going to get messed up right like that. There we go. Kind of keep an eye on those. They are like cobwebs. They like to get messed up. Sometimes when you find where there was a leaf, not a nodule there, it's a little easier to pull the outer bark up from right where that little leaf node was. Point, you will find that when you start scraping this to get the outer little layer of thin bark to come off, there comes a point where there's no good long strong fibers underneath, and you'll see the ends of some fibers, but they'll be too weak to grab. Alright, so I'm going to try this where you... Okay, so I've already stripped the good long strong fiber off of this a couple of times, and when I start going at it with my nail here, there aren't very many strong fibers left. So while I can see some fibers, when I pull this off, they're not long and they're really wispy, very much like cobwebs. As you can see, that's just a little shred of fiber there. I keep this one anyway, but typically when it gets down to that point, I don't bother trying to extract all those little weak fibers because they're not going to be typically great for cordage anyway. I think think I can get one more pull maybe off of this side. Yeah, not great. So this is one piece, and we've got all this fiber off of it. And that'll make a fair amount of thread, basically, once it's twisted into tiny little cordage. It's so shiny. And then I come back over here, get my bundle, tease out the next piece, and eventually you're going to get down to the scrappy bits, like right in here, that are just really small, and it's a matter of patience. You just go through them, clean them one at a time. You will soon come to the realization that you pick out the best fibers, and even if that's not every single fiber that you could potentially get out of a strip, the little tiny ones are sometimes more trouble than they're worth. I'll give it a little start with the serrated edge, just because it's easier than doing that with the nails over and over again. Oops. It split there, so let me get the rest of that thin bark. Try to get it all off in one pass. Alright, this piece is already split, so I'm just going to go ahead and use half of it at a time here. Incidentally, this can take hours. Wear comfortable shoes and get yourself some music or a book on tape. And what you don't want to do here, it's given me trouble, is when you have an entire bundle that you've kind of untangled like this, that's hanging out, you don't want to crumple that back up and put it back in the water, because then they will all get hopelessly tangled. So in the event that you do need to put them back in water and to take a break or come back to it later, and you want them to remain workable and soft, I don't know, put a clothespin around it or something maybe. I would not try a rubber band. That could break them quite a lot trying to get it back off. I find that the art of removing that outer bark is as much feeling it as seeing it. There will be strips where you're honestly not sure if you got all the outer bark off because it's white and it blends. But if you feel it carefully with your fingers, usually you can feel the slightly rougher texture of that outer bark. Makes it a little bit easier to get it off. Incidentally, if anybody has a better idea for how to extract fiber more easily, feel free to let me know, because this is kind of tedious. But that's basically it. I'm just going to keep working through my entire pot worth of strips here. And take that outer bark off little by little. Save my beautiful pristine white fibers aside. And then I'll be back to show you, once those fibers are dried, how to twist it into cordage. Bit of fiber, it's been separated out and purified as much as possible, so we've got as little bark, wood chips, or whatever in here as possible. We've set it out flat to dry, and it has dried into these strands that are actually not necessarily, they're not really one strand, they're just kind of stuck together because they were wet and we had set them out to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and soften these up. I could go through one at a time with my nails and kind of fluff them up like this. Are you able to see the fluffing? But I'm going to try this instead. Got a soft brush that I stole from my husband. This is his beard brush. So we'll see how that works. I'm just going to go down the fibers and see if I can space them, soften them up a little bit. Maybe a really crunchy bit so you can hit with the side of the brush. And as you can see, we are pulling out little particles of bark. We're also pulling out some of the short fibers, which are now tangling down here at the bottom. You can pull these out. We could leave them in, but they'll make lumps if you're trying to make very fine cordage. So we're going to pull those out. There we go. And the end result is going to be mostly just the long fibers, pretty well cleaned up. Some of these still have a tiny bit of bark left in them. Okay, I get a good look. But for the most part, we've got pretty clean fibers here. And look over here on this side. This is what came out of the brush. These are mostly shorter fibers and the tangled ends that make lump in your cordage. So I'm not going to throw these away. What I'm going to do is look for any particularly good looking long fibers that I can pull out of this that may have just been caught up in the brush. Pull the tangles out. And if I do get, a bit of nice long fiber, long enough to work for cordage, that's long enough. I'm going to put that back in my pile of long fibers. And the rest of this I'm going to hold on to because I'm going to make basically rough cordage out of the bee cuts, where once it's wound together, it's not silky smooth. I don't know if you can see this. It's not silky smooth. It's got little bits of bark and impurities in it, but it is pretty strong. And this was made out of these brush out ends. I'm calling them bee cuts automatically because if you're talking about spinning wool, A cuts is the good wool, B cuts is like, the side skirtings, the short pieces, the ones that are maybe not perfectly clean. And they still serve a purpose. They don't make quite as strong or as nice of cordage, but this is still pretty strong. All right, so we're going to move outside and show you how to make cordage from this in the sun, where you can maybe get a better view. Alright, so we've got good light out here. The first thing I'm going to do is separate out just a tiny little bit of this fiber. And I'm separating from the middle, but then I hold that in the middle and run my hand along this way. If I pull this in a different way, it's going to tangle the ends, but badly. So grab in the middle and slowly separate it. So here's my working piece. As you can tell, this is not a whole lot, but right now I'm aiming to make some very fine cordage that's basically thread. I'm going to pick the middle, roughly, of my piece, space my fingers about an inch or two apart, and start twisting, 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 twisting.
Now what are you doing with the twisting? It looks like you're twisting away from you.
I am twisting away from me, but only with one hand because I'm right-handed. And what I'm doing is I'm waiting for this. See what it's doing here against my shirt? Can you see? Where it automatically wants to twist up. All right, so once you get that, maybe give it one more twist. If you twist it too much, you risk breaking the fibers. So you want it just about at that point. And I don't want to let it do a wild twist in the beginning, because if I do a wild twist and you take a close look at that, you'll see that that twist is really kind of loose. Like, it didn't twist very many times. But if I fold it in half, and then I'm going to take my other hand and twist it in the opposite directions to help tighten the twist, it holds because the tension of the initial twisting made a really nice end to my thread. As you can see, that has now twisted many times around itself, and it is a really nice, fine, even little thread.
So you were twisting away from you and then towards you?
Well, I flipped it over. So I was twisting away from myself this way, then I flipped it over and continued in the same direction. So because I flipped it over, it was now towards me. Now I'm going to put it back in the original position, and I've got this thread end started, so I have something to hold on to, this last little almost an inch there. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to that inch. I'm going to take the top thread and continue in the same direction. So I was twisting it away from myself. 1, 2, come back over top, hold it with these fingers. Now this is the second one. 1, 2. Lay them together and twist away from myself with the other hand. And that continues a nice, fine, tight thread. Are you able to zoom in on that? All right, now we've got, twice as long of a piece of thread to hold on to. So hold on to that. 1, 2 good twists there. Oops. Hold on to that one. That's the one I just twisted. This is the loose one. 1, 2. Put them together. Twist the other way. Thread's getting longer. Now, as you go, you'll see that the end here is starting to get kind of short. You don't want that end to get real short because you need that loose fiber to attach new fibers in. So I'm going to put that down here and hopefully the wind won't blow it away. Okay, maybe I'll just hold it there. And then I'm going to separate out another just comparably tiny little bit of fiber here from the middle, pulling outward. There's my new little piece of fiber. I like that end. So I'm going to take this end. I'm going to line it up with one, doesn't really matter which one you do first, one side of my string. I'm going to hold it in, and I'm going to twist them all together. Okay. If you get ends like this that stick out, you can kind of just get them wet. I usually just lick my fingers and get them wet. You can use water if you prefer. And now they're loosely held together. If I pull on this, it will pull off. But it does hold it together and give me a chance to even out those fibers and get them attached well. And I'm going to go do another little tiny pinch of fibers here, about the same amount. Starting from the middle, combing outward. Find the end where they're more or less lined up here. And I'm going to attach this to my other little leg of fibers over here. I don't want this one to get involved. And we'll fold those down. And turn. Alright, so now instead of 2 little short pieces sticking out here, I now have 2 lengthy pieces. And I'm going to continue as I was going. So I'm holding the finished end of the thread in my left hand. 1, 2, flip towards me, hold it still. The other leg, 1, oops, I just messed up. 1, 2, lay them together, and spin in the other direction. 1, oops. You gotta keep these ends from getting tangled together, because that does cause some problems. 1, 2, cross back towards myself over top. 1, 2, lay them down together, spin the other way. And go ahead and tighten that up. And in just a minute here, you'll actually be able to see the part where I spliced them together. 1, 2, cross over towards myself, over top and towards. 1, 2, lay them together, spin the other way. And then just settling the spin there, evening it out. And if you are able to see, it's kind of hard to see it if I fluff it up. You can kind of see a little bit of fluff right here. This is where I spliced in the new set of fibers. So, and you just continue like that forever. If this gets obnoxiously long and you start tangling it up on stuff, wrap it around something like a bobbin from a spool of thread or a piece of wood or whatever, really. Just wrap it around and around something. Sometimes I've used a bag clip, wrapped it around one half of the bag clip and then allowed it to close so that it keeps it from unwinding and falling down on the ground and running away from me. Whatever you want, but that's an easy way to kind of hold on to your ends. A little thin here. Some of my fibers have ended, leaving me with an uneven amount of fiber left, so I'm going to add some more in. You don't need to add fiber on both sides at the same time all the time. What you really want is just to keep the overall amount of fiber on each side the same thickness. So if you need to add a few fibers or subtract a few, well, not subtract, if you need to add a few fibers or even a few more fibers, that's fine. They don't always have to be lined up correctly. I'm just getting them twisted on here. And as it turns out, the other side could use a little boost too, so I'm just going to grab a little tiny bit. Oh, that's too much. Just a little bit. Tiny little bit. As you can see, despite the fact that it takes a lot of work to get this fiber, it lasts a good long time if you're making very fine cordage. A little goes a long way. And because this stuff is so strong, I personally don't like to make it real thick. I mean, if I made a strong rope, say, I don't know, that big around, like, you know, a climbing rope, I would not hesitate to climb it. In fact, I think I might even try towing a car with it, possibly even a truck. But that's just me. And I have not tried it, so don't bet on it. So now I'm doing in smaller portions because this keeps getting tangled if I do too much at once. So I'm just going to do a shorter amount. And instead of doing 2 twists, I'm giving it 1 good twist, flip, 1 good twist, flip, back the other way on the left hand. And then here you can see Right here's where I just spliced in again. It's just a little bit less tight, and that's going to even out a little at the very end. When you're done making cordage, and you've got all the cordage and it's been twisted as many times as you're going to twist it, the last step is to get it wet and then let it dry, and that sets the twist. That way it is not prone to unraveling and spinning back out if it gets cut, which allows you to actually cut this like you would, say, sewing thread, and it won't naturally just unravel forever. It might unravel a couple of twists, but not a huge amount. So here I see that this fiber, this side is getting a little thin. This side is nice and long and thick. This side's getting a little thin and also a little short. So add a little fiber to it. Just a little bit.
Looks like the kind of thing that might make a good off-grid prepper skill, or something you could do around the fire. Or
Yeah, actually it's one of my favorite camping activities. Oops, what did I just do? There it is. The wind is blowing and now it's all floating around everywhere. It's hard to keep track of. Just gonna try to line up the ends a little bit better here. There we go. So that I can keep track of them. And then I'm just going to dry twist this on. A little smoothing. There, now my short, fine, diminishing fiber end has been replenished, but the other end is still good. So I'm going to continue on with that. No, getting connected there. So, twist, flip, twist, flip, twist, flip, twist, flip. Watch tension, backspin it to even out the tensions between these two sides. This backspin is important because if this doesn't get a proper amount of spin here, it's not going to be as strong. Part of the strength of this fiber is just straight tensile strength when you pull just straight across on it. Part of the added strength of making cordage is that these fibers, they lock together as they twist around each other, and so you get the strength of the friction that would be necessary to pull them apart, in addition to the straight tensile strength of the fibers. So if you just had two fibers lined up side by side, it would be easier to pull on these hard enough to break them than if they were twisted together. If they're twisted once and then you take this finished piece of string and you twist it again and make a double wide piece of string like this, it becomes basically twice as strong. And that would be the same process, only instead of using loose fibers, you would be using two ends of a piece of string. I may go over that in a different video, but for right now, I'm not going to double twist this one, or at least not yet. I'm just going from straight fiber to, basically thread. And this is some really strong thread. So, if you were inclined to do something the old-fashioned way from absolute scratch, and you were going to do something like, say, I don't know, sew leather shoes maybe, or sew leather clothing items together, this would probably be my preferred choice of thread to do it with. Might wax it, but this is strong. This is just about as strong as that waxed nylon leather sewing thread that you can find that I can never remember the name of. But kind of expensive. It's like $15 a spool. And it works well. It's basically beeswax dental floss. Comes in different colors. Big, fat, thick dental floss. Too thick to actually use for dental floss, but the same stuff. If you're out in nature, or if you just prefer natural fibers, there you go. Despite the fact that this looks like a very fine thread, it's, and I know this from experience, it is a little too thick to use for dental floss. You, don't hurt yourself trying this, please. Take it from somebody who may or may not have experimented with that a little bit. Not good for dental floss. Just saying. All right, that's it.